Well, I'm going to give you the rationale behind the Syrian crisis. This is going to be a short video because it's so damn obvious, and I'll cut right to the chase. Basically, it's the Hegelian dialect, the Hegelian concept. Out of chaos comes change, new structuring. Out of disorder becomes a new order, and that's really what's going on because it's quite obvious that it's not the will of the European people in Germany or Greece or France or England or the UK, whatever, United States for the largely, that refugees just come here and there's no like filtering as to who's the good guys and who's the bad guys. Just come on over here because you could be some jihadist against the our way of life. If that's your rules, you want to be that way, fine. If you go by Sharia law, well, you do that in a Sharia country, but the modus operandi of Islam is actually to force Islam on the entire world. But there's more going on here behind the scenes. I know a lot of people are looking at them coming on boats and, wow, yeah, we're sorry, yeah, we feel bad for you and all this. Depends on who the hell it is. But obviously what's going on here is that, well, I don't know if you want to call it the powers that be, but obviously that, if you want to call it the powers that be, the political leaders, no matter where they are, there's such a commonality, a theme that despite whatever the refugees do, or there's like a hands-off policy. It doesn't matter if it's Sweden, if it's in Denmark, if it's in Germany, it's in France, no matter where the hell it is. And actually, in the United States, they're bringing in a lot more refugees than officially they're saying. It's quite obvious. I don't even want to call it refugees because it's probably people that are jihadists and stuff. But the thing is, there's no argument in being involved here. This is a clandestine policy being pushed by, I guess we'll call it the powers that be, because what's going to happen is it's going to create major turmoil. And when the major turmoil is going to occur is when there's a major conflict in the Middle East. I think they're setting up for years now a major conflict in the Middle East, partly between Iran and Iraq, but also between the Islamic world and Israel. And when that happens, even though Obama's in office right now, say for instance it's Hillary Clinton, Bloomberg, Bernie Sanders, Trump, or any one of the, or if it's Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, even Jeb Bush, any one of those candidates that's in the front running, Jeb Bush, right? John Cashel, whatever, any one of those candidates would be coming in on the side of Israel. There's no more Obama legacy anymore. If that happens, I'll guarantee you there's loads of people that are within the refugees that are plants in this country to fight internally against the USA, against Europe, or against anybody that's going against an Islamic country in the Middle East. But the thing is, it's not so much that, is that it's going to definitely create such turmoil in the West, in Europe, and in the United States that it's going to create, it's just like the Hegelian concept, like I told you from day one. Out of disorder comes in a new set of draconian rules. That's the way they always play it. Here in New York, Syrian refugees, welcome, whatever, fine. It's not so ideological as it sounds. It's not. I hate even using that word refugee because who's a refugee and who's not a refugee? Now, obviously, I'm not going to play the game like Donald Trump saying, yeah, let's ban them all right now, because you got to be careful who you bring in. But they're bringing in people clandestinely, even in the United States, in military bases and military airports by the tens of thousands that you don't know about. Not that the public can't see. And the reason they're doing that is obvious, that they're trying to deliberately create a problem in the United States. Now, this is where karma comes around full circle, because, a lot of times people are worried about, they have, what do you call that? Mercenaries being paid by corporations that were, a lot of times these mercenaries were former military, U.S. military. And, it's quite obvious. There's a lot of people that join the military. Why? So they can kill somebody and get away with it. There's no doubt about that. I mean, there's even people that go in the police force to get away. Not all of them, but there's people like that around. It's not like it's 1% of them either. And those are the type of people that will hire on as mercenaries, that may be going against U.S. citizens and working for corporate interests for their own profit, right? Because the corporations are paying them. But you know what? Even these same mercenaries that are like, you're thinking, oh, they're so bad. Well, you know what's going to happen? They're going to be at odds with the Islamic elements because they're not one of them. Once you're an infidel, you're an infidel. It's too bad, You're not going to be one of them. So, like, karma comes around full circle. And, some of the people you think that were like, maybe they're against the American people. They might be the ones that are on the side of the American people, too. It might come about unexpectedly. But out of all this confusion where it creates all these social problems, they're going to just crack down with more rules and more laws. And that's the whole name of the game. Out of all the confusion comes a new order, and out of disorder comes in more structure and more rules. That's why they're bringing them in. And they're coming in, all different ways, like in Europe. Not so easily in the United States, but then the Obama administration's got plane loads of them coming in, like into Pennsylvania and stuff like that. They're coming in left and right, tens of thousands of them. There's a plan. There's a method behind the madness. It's not like even like, maybe Obama is pro-Muslim or pro-Islam, fine, but it's not like that's not the whole freaking overall structure. The overall structure is they're using this as a way to create total disorder so they can come in and crack down and have, extreme rules on people and freaking own your ass, basically, That's really what they're doing. That's the whole name of the game. The United Nations, it was founded on basically the Soviet Constitution, even a United UN symbol, with the leaf like that going around the world like the way it is. That's really taken from the Soviet symbol, and it's all been supported by the Rockefeller Foundation. It's about total control. So I just wanted to put this out briefly so you get an overview of what's going on, but I think the refugee, I don't even want to call them that. What are they actually? Some are refugees and some are jihadists. That's really what it is. I mean, yeah, there really are some refugees that are saying, I want to get the hell away from these crazy, extreme Muslim people, and I'm going to some place where they don't have all these wacky Sharia law. There are people like that are coming over. But, I'd be like, fine, you can come on over. But then there's other people that are not coming over for that reason. So, and it's quite obvious that the governments, or whatever you want to call it, like the people in charge, all the leaders all along the world, are pursuing the same policy. They're trying to. The real chaos is gonna hit when we have a major conflict in the Middle East. That could be happening pretty soon because now they're talking about. I've been reading these stories about Saudi Arabia's got thousands of troops getting ready to attack in Syria and all this kind of garbage. I don't know. And if that happens, Russia's going to respond, and maybe not. It could be another one of those BS rumors. But I'm looking at the policies pursued by the Obama administration for the last several years, which I expect, if they were going to do the right thing, they would have whacked Iran a long time ago. They'd have been done with. I also know, I shouldn't say this on here, but I also know there's some elements in that are looking like, what the hell, the Muslims are going to fight the Christians, and the Christians are our enemies, though. And, I don't like that deal because there's some of that going on, too. But it's not all of that. There's a lot of different elements going on here because a lot of people tend to blame one thing or another, but usually when something moves someplace, it's a lot of people are moving it that way. It's almost like the Ouija board. It's almost like with the Kennedy assassination. There's a whole bunch of different people had an interest in getting rid of that guy, right? He was a good guy. He was the guy for us, the people, but there's a lot of people that had various motives to get rid of him. And that's a whole nother freaking 2-hour-long subject. But the main thing behind the refugees coming in is not liberalism and huggy feely shit. No, it's about deliberately setting up problems in the nation because they're not really bringing in refugees. They're bringing in anybody carte blanche. They don't know who the hell they're getting. Now, obviously, if there's people that were trying to get away from Sharia law, like if I was born over in Syria and I was like, I don't want to get the hell away from these whack jobs. I'd be like, get me the hell out of here, fine. But then again, that's not with everything that's going on. And the fact that the governments are bringing them in by policy, carte blanche, no matter what government it is in Western Europe and the United States, there's a modus operandi going on, and it's going to come about. You think problems are now extreme? No, when there's a major conflict in the Middle East, that's when you're going to see these jihadists come out from behind the scenes with the refugees and attack, the host countries they're in. And you've seen that happen with the guy with the machete. He went into that Jewish establishment. He was yelling, "Oh, look, whatever," and chopping people. I'll tell you one thing. I did say something. I think there is certain there are certain people. Well, it's like this. It's like just like this in every community. I know people are saying like the Jews are behind this policy and stuff, but there are like elements in every community that are certain. Just nobody's thinking the same. But I could say this. I think about the Jewish community. Every single Jew in the United States and in Europe and Israel ought to be armed to the teeth to defend themselves and their families. Because when it comes right down to it, you can't depend upon the authorities. You can only depend upon yourself. And, you ain't got to convince me that the Muslims are freaking radical and crazy. You ain't got to convince me, because I know there's a lot of people on the internet talking about the Palestinians, and you don't have to convince me. I know that. You don't have to convince me. I'll say something very unpopular here, maybe amongst the freaking internet masses, but personally, I think the whole Middle East ought to just belong to Israel. The hell with it. The hell with all those other bullshit places. That's what I think. You don't like that? Too bad. But, so I don't like it when people play tricky shit on me, you know what I mean? So, anyway, the modus operandi behind why they're bringing in all these refugees, which includes jihadists and radical elements, is that when there's going to be a major conflict, there is going to be a major conflict in the Middle East. Obama's already set it up, man. It's going to happen. May not happen during his administration. I know there's rumors out there if Saudi attacks real soon, maybe it will happen during his administration last year. I don't know. When that happens, you're going to see a lot of people a lot of these so-called refugees are going to be doing stuff internally in our countries. And then they're going to crack down with draconian laws and all this other garbage. And that's really what the whole game is about. I'm pretty sure of it. But, I'm not putting this out in a fear-monger way. I'm just telling you, that's exactly what they're doing. And if you're Jewish, don't go thinking that the government's going to save your ass. Get yourself a gun. I'm telling you right now, man. I know, I know, like in, what the hell is it, Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership? They realize that a lot of the Jewish community is for gun control, but whatever you're for, fine. Get yourself a gun because you're going to need it. And, the biggest enemies in the world are coming in this country right now, and you're in danger. And if they do things against the Jewish population, well, the government's going to use that as an excuse to come down with more draconian laws. Who the hell needs that shit? Anyway, so I got to say on this because ain't nothing I can do about it, really. Nothing I could do about it that I could actually state on here that I could do. So I just want to let you know what their plan is. This isn't like just stupid, they're not stupid. They're not stupid just bringing in all these people and saying, oh, we got to help save these refugees. Yeah, they know what's going on. It's designed to freaking cause chaos in these countries, and then it'll bring down more draconian laws. But it's not going to really be very apparent until there's a major conflict in the Middle East. Then you're going to start seeing what's going to happen in the countries to where they brought these quote unquote refugees in. They're going to do a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and I don't know. Just be forewarned, man. That's all I'm saying. Nothing I could freaking change about this because I'm not the president of the United States and say I want to reverse policy on bringing in refugees into Pennsylvania by the plane load and all this kind of garbage. That's Obama, man. Valerie Jarrett and all this other garbage. So Jews in America, arm the hell out of yourself because you're going to need those weapons. No BSing around. And Israel is going to thrive and survive no matter what happens. I'll guarantee you that. There's no doubt about it. I'm not one of those Christian Zionists, or I'm just using common sense. Israel is going to thrive and survive. There's no problem about it. And in a lot of ways, it's good they bring in these radical elements because a lot of people are figuring out now in Sweden and Germany and France, oh, the Palestinians. Well, now you know what's going on in Israel for the last freaking umpteen years. Now you know, right? You got a taste of it firsthand, huh? Hey, figure it out, buddy. You'll figure it out. Israel, I'm on your side, and unfortunately, sometimes there are certain elements in Israel that are doing some shit that's not cool, like, well, not Israel, but in certain, like Bloomberg and Feinstein. I could think of two politicians in the United States that are Jewish that are screwed up. And I'm thinking to myself, man, it's like I don't support everybody that's Jewish, man, but I support, Jews in Israel and as a whole, that's for sure. But Bloomberg and Feinstein, go to hell.